Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to blend your shading. Often when you do shading, you're going to want a sharp effect, and then you won't blend it. But sometimes you want to blend it in if you're doing a more painting style drawing, or if that's just how you want to learn to shade. For this, we're of course going to need to shade something first. I'm going to color this in quickly and then shade it. If you haven't seen my tutorial on how to shade before, in Ibis Paint I tend to use the multiply layer feature right here and use a light purple. Because of the layer blending mode, the purple automatically changes to an orangey sort of color. Then if you want, you can lower the opacity, which I'm going to do a little bit just to make it look a bit nicer. And then to blend it, the general rule is going to be getting the blur brush. Often it will be in the brush menu for drawing apps, but here it is also in the main bar, right here as a tool. I tend to have the opacity somewhere around the middle and then blur gently at the edges to help it blend in. You can of course use custom brushes instead to just blend things off right off the bat with low opacity, but I like going in here and blurring it this way. You can blur as much or as little as you want, but keep going until you think it looks more blended. Also bear in mind, the more you blur, the less there's going to be on the edges, so it might take away a bit of what you've drawn. Just keep sort of blurring in the parts that you want to do, and then you will notice that it is blended in a lot more. If you're like me and that's still usually not enough for you, you can always just go back in and do a little bit extra in the most inner parts. This will make sure that your actual shading stays there, and then from there I'd usually just blur those bits out a tiny bit. Just like this, find the edge and blur it. Keep going until you are satisfied. And then there you have it, a lot more blended in shading. You can also blend in light shading, but it generally doesn't work as well. If you did want to do that though, here is how. I usually use the add layer setting, and then I'll get the color that I used to flat color and put it by where the light shading would be. So for this drawing, around here, and an extra bit there just to make it look nice. With this one, it's much more of a stylistic choice. I don't tend to usually blur them, but if you do want to, then it follows the same sort of method. Except with this one, I recommend being a lot more gentle around where you do blur, because it makes quite an effect and can sometimes be the opposite of what you were aiming for. Just gently blur around the edges until you're happy with it. And then it's much more glowy. As you can see with smaller bits, they tend to blur out better. Or you could just use a bigger blur brush. These blend them out, but with this type of shading, it will never really be subtle unless you go for a really, really thin brush, which you can do if you want. It's also important to note that you can lower the opacity on this layer if you want it to be more blended. Then it is much more blended in, and I would usually just put one more layer on top of that, make it add, and keep it at full opacity. I'll probably go for something a bit more neon, or even white if you really want to accentuate just how bright this is. Then just lightly blur those parts out too, but only the edges. And then when you come back, you notice that it really makes it look a lot brighter. Of course, this is again all stylistic, so you can choose to do it however you want, but this is how I would personally do it. I hope that this helped you out, and if you had a different way of doing it, then maybe let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, bye!